Hello, my friends, and welcome to a brand new episode of Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah Babbins, and in this episode, we sit down with John Graham. Now, John is an incredible magician, and at this moment, his book is absolutely exploding stage by stage. And there's a book all about transitioning to stage magic. And in this episode, I basically went behind the scenes and asked him every single direct question that I had about figuring out stage magic. And his stuff is great, the book is great, and his advice is even better. You are going to love this episode as much as I did. Please get excited for the one and only John Graham. John Graham. John, how are you?
I'm good, Jonah. How are you?
I am doing great. It's such a pleasure to have you. You know, there's lots of ways that people join me on this podcast. Sometimes I say, oh, I need to have him. Sometimes it's the endless chain. Sometimes people recommend it. This was the other day, I was just sitting on the couch and I just got a call from Aussie Wind and he said, Jonah, you have to have John on the podcast. And I said, okay. And when Aussie calls you and says, you have to do this, I said, okay. And actually, since then, I've just been digging in and devouring everything you've done. And what perfect timing, because just heard amazing, amazing things about your performance and lecture at Magi Fest. So just excited to dive in. So why don't we start at the very, very beginning? Well, first of all, how are you? How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. And thanks for those kind words. And I'm honored to be a part of your podcast.
Such a pleasure to have you here and really excited to dive in. Let's start at the very beginning. How did you get started in magic?
Well, I think like most kids who were always into magic when they were kids, and some of us just took to it a little more intensely. And what really set me over the edge when I was about 11 years old, I was already into magic a bit, but I was with a friend of mine and we were downtown and just going from store to store. And he said, do you want to go to the magic shop? And there was so many emotions filled my head in that one moment. I thought, a magic shop? Is there a magic shop? You better not be lying about this. How did I not know? So I just said, yeah, but I didn't believe that there really would be one. We go into this building and we go up to the fourth floor and turn the corner and there's a magic shop. And I was there, every week since then, every Saturday. I mean, that was my routine. And as a teenager, magic really became an obsession, like I think it did for most of us, and just reading all the books and trying to learn as much as I could about magic, not because I felt the need to learn it, but because I had the desire to learn magic. So having the magic shop really helped to solidify and feed my interest.
Help me understand what you were thinking at the time. Like, being a teen, being a kid, being interested in magic is one thing. And then you start to discover the world of magic. Now, it sounds like obviously you're talking about tannins, right? Going or no.
It's that experience for many people, but I was not born in New York. I live in Pennsylvania.
In Pennsylvania.
Shop local to me, Mel's Magic City, which is still open and still a great magic shop.
And also, it's also like a fourth floor, like same kind of idea.
At that time it was. And now it's a street level shop. But yeah, the same kind of idea where it was this out of the way kind of thing that nobody knew about, and you had to know about it in order to know about it,
right?
Which is kind of funny.
I guess in my head I was thinking about New York, but now I understand it was Pennsylvania. Yeah. And talk to me about like the community there. Was it the kind of thing where you'd go to the magic shop and you'd be able to hang out with magicians and be part of the magic community? Or was the magic shop a place of solitude, where you go and buy the thing and then you go back to your room or the library or wherever to go work on it? How was like the magician connecting part of it?
It was really, like you say, almost a place of solitude. I would be in there every Saturday, many times as the only customer, because the owner had the shop almost as a hobby, because he had a different career, but he loved magic and loves magic and wanted to have a magic shop. So I would be the only magician in there. And once in a while, other people who were into magic would come in, and I was like, wow, I could talk about magic with this person and he can do a trick and I can watch it. But the owner did a lot of magic. He made the effort to learn a lot of the tricks that were coming in. And so it's just really, I just loved everything that I saw, when you're young and that you don't have that bias and you don't have that jadedness of everything as you develop when you're older. So it really was a situation where I was by myself and, talked about magic with him all the time, but I didn't know about the magic community at large, which I discovered later. There is a bit of that in every town. And so as I got older, I started going to some magic meetings and things like that.
What I'm wondering is you start going to the magic shop, you start learning magic. It's just like you hanging out there on Saturdays or, you with, I assume, books and tricks and, going home and taking this and playing with it. What was the next step? Was the next step to say, hey, I want to go and perform with this thing? Hey, I want to go connect with the magic community. What's the next step for you to kind of take magic more seriously? When did it happen and what was it?
Well, even as a teenager, I knew that I loved magic. And I saw people who were working in jobs and doing things who also loved magic, but weren't doing it professionally, and just seemed kind of a travesty in a way that they would have only a few hours in the day to work on magic. And I was just obsessed with magic. And I thought, well, if I could make magic my career, I could work on magic all the time. And it seems like a weird thing to have that realization when you're a kid, but I just knew that I loved magic that much that that's what I wanted to do. But throughout high school, I didn't do any shows, but I had these grand visions in my head for what I was going to be as a professional magician. So right when I graduated from high school is when I started trying to book shows and do shows. And I didn't really know how to do either, but you learn by doing. As you know, you just kind of put yourself out there and you start doing shows and you don't know what you don't know, but you learn it as you go.
It almost feels like, there's magicians who I know that they got into magic, whether it's because they got into magic late or whether it's because of the area of the world they got into it or whatever, that it's a practice of solitude and not something of the community. And it's interesting that a lot of those times, those people go directly towards professional. They don't know what else to do. What do you do with magic? You go and perform it. How do you do it? I don't know. You find a stage and you go and perform. Do you think that you kind of figuring it out yourself had something to do with it? Was there some sort of like community going on at the same time, or no, you were just like winging it, graduating school, being like, I know I want to do this and trying to figure it out for yourself?
Maybe a bit of both. Obviously a lot of help along the way, but when it comes to doing shows and learning how to do shows, there really is no other way than doing it, than putting yourself out there. You could always look at people who you think have an advantage, like maybe people who get into it later in life, they have the advantage that they know who they are already. And you could be a 14-year-old kid and you're reading a magic book and it says, be yourself. And you're like, what do you mean myself? Who am I? And you don't know, you're a kid. And it says, be natural and be original. And it can be very intimidating when you're reading that as a kid.
It makes me think of a lot of the times when I'm trying to give advice or share or try to even just share other people's advice, on this, I'm talking to two different people. I'm talking to the people who are trying to get the confidence to go and do it for the first time or the fifth time or the 25th time or whatever. And I'm also talking to the people who have done it 187 times or 312 and are looking for the advice to how to make the 313th better or how to do even sharper, how to grow even more. And, I think we're going to start getting to the conversation where we talk to the people that have done this hundreds and thousands of times. But let's go back to that moment in time for you where you were just figuring it out and just trying to hop on that stage and just trying to do things. And let's put us in your mind. So first, let's talk about maybe business-wise, what you actually did. And then let's talk about magic-wise, as somebody who probably liked, not to use this word, but fiddling with tricks. Think about close-up tricks, like singing in a magic shop. It's tricks, it's toys, it's fiddling, it's stuff. And now you have to perform on a stage. And those are very different things. So let's talk, I guess, maybe magic-wise first and then business-wise. Talk to me about the magic. When you were just figuring this out on stage, what did you do? What was going through your head?
Oh, man. I had no idea what I was doing I was doing close-up magic for my whole life. And my whole young life, by the time I was 18 and 20 and 22 and 24, when I was 25 is when I said, I'm going to get serious about putting together a stage show, because I was working at some places where opportunities to perform on stage were starting to emerge. So I was going from close up to stage, but my earliest stage shows, looking back on them, were really, I mean, I'm just glad it was before the era where everything is on video.
Right.
Because it was hard. And I mean, you just feel this weight of everyone watching you and not caring and not being engaged. And you still have to get through your time. I mean, I did some disastrous things when I look back on it, but I think that does help you to get better because you learn from that.
Do you have an example or a story of something that either you did really wrong or really right?
One of the things I did years ago was, the sands of the desert routine.
Of course.
The sand goes into the water, which is a mess of a trick anyway. I mean, you have bowls of water, bowls of sand, a table. It's a lot of stuff to even manage on stage. If your only job was to bring it on stage and move it from one area to the other, that would be a lot of work, let alone trying to do a trick. So I had this, what I thought was a great idea. I had 2 Loto bowls, one in each hand. And I had this big speech about the ancient Egyptians, of course, and how they used to get water, and we these days pour it from a gallon jug. So I would hold the Loto bowls up as if I was, calling to the heavens. And I thought it was so brilliant because I'd pour the water out of one completely. And then from my other hand, pour the water out of the other one while the other Loto bowl was now filling up. And I thought that was so clever because now I could pour the water from the left hand while the bowl was filling up in the right hand. But it felt like it took so much time on stage as I was doing it. I could just feel the audience, looking at me disapprovingly. Yeah. And then the effect, I mean, now you're taking sand and the music, and I was using a song by Enigma, which, I don't even remember the song, and putting it into the water, and just, it's going on and on and on and on. And then the effect is like, so what? Who cares? You pulled out dry sand from the water, So that was kind of a story that, has kind of a negative memory.
Yeah, one of those moments on stage that you can't shake, right? When you're like, I'm going to do this, and you do it nice and slowly, and then you're standing on stage just feeling every second of that bad decision, every single second.
I remember telling the audience, I was going to tell them a story about how I got into magic, and I had this very beautifully written story. But as soon as I was in front of the audience doing it, I felt the need to cut. And now the story is kind of falling apart. And that's why I think, you have to trust your material. You have to work on it and be realistic as you're working on it, so that when you do it on stage, you can trust what you know and you could trust what you've rehearsed and do it the way you've planned. So you don't doubt yourself in the moment.
I think one challenge that I've had and a lot of people have with scripting, I'm going to say the word, is what they feel like scripting means is I sit and I write, and then I take that writing and I internalize and memorize it, and then I go on stage and I do it. And the problem is, for me, is that when Jonah sipping tea in the corner of his room, sitting in his wonderful chair, thinking about what he could say at his most elegant and eloquent, is not the same Jonah as the one on stage with the lights on him and people staring at him and me going, do I really want to, do this 30-second monologue that nobody cares about? And I say that because you made a joke about, like, obviously it was, some story about the ancient Egyptians or whatever, when you were doing this trick for the first time, and you've been through a journey of deciding what to say and how to say it so that you can be confident in the stuff that you write beforehand to go and say it on stage. Now, for me, I haven't mastered that yet. What I mean is I go and perform, I record it, then I turn that into a script, and then I work on that, I still can't sit in my room and really put myself on stage and write for the very first time the script that it always feels like that Loto Bowl moment you're talking, or, that moment where I'm like, I wrote all this stuff and now I'm saying it. Do you have any advice for that transition, for that? How do you write in a way that you are on the stage? Or is it really this hybrid thing where, no, you don't write in a vacuum and then go put it on a stage? Really, it's a little bit of give and take. Can you walk us through that?
I think it can be either way. It can be a give and take because you can plan your trick and practice your routine and have a general sense of what you're going to say. And like you said, record it and then go back to it and edit it that way. But if you're not performing on stage that much and you're trying to put together a whole show, you'd really have no other choice but to write it out. And it doesn't have to be memorized word for word, but the thing that writing it out gives you is you learn where you're repeating yourself. You're saying, I've said the same thing here that I'm saying here. I can cut that whole line and make the routine tighter. Or why am I saying it at this point when I should say it at that point? And then it gives you a place to go. So you write your script out, literally writing it out, then you practice it, then you go back and you look at your script and you say, oh, I forgot to say this part. I have to say this. And so it reminds you that way. But I think it's okay to do it the way you're saying too.
I love what you said there about the script. Just for me to just say it another way, which is when you're rehearsing your script and your lines and your bits, like the point is not for you to go, phew, I said every line, nailed it. The point is for you to go, you realize you get to the end, you go, my goodness, this trick has a gift and I never gave it out. I forgot to give it out and it's sitting in my oh my goodness, how did I forget to give it the gift? And now you go, okay, right after I do this, I have to remind myself, this is when you get, as a matter of fact, I'm going to write myself a joke so I remember to never forget this thing again. And that's what it's about. It's not about making sure that you remember every single thing that you wrote down. You never will. Or if you do, congrats on your memory, What it's about is making sure that the whole thing works and makes sense and you're not saying the same line 4 times or missing the most important beat of the trick or whatever. Is that right? Am I understanding what you're saying correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's my opinion too. I feel the same way.
And that's helpful because as somebody who that's helpful because when I write and I try to say it, I judge myself for missing the things I wrote. I forgot to say this. But if it's not important, if it's not imperative, maybe it's not the end of the world,
But it's exactly, and it's remembering and being aware of what to say.
Right.
Because as you know, sometimes there's one sentence that can just make a routine stronger. And you have to remember to say that one sentence and put it in the right moment. I wrote out one routine that I do when I was practicing it. I would rehearse it and I think, okay, I'm going to write out the script. And then I wrote out the whole thing and I was like so pleased because now I said, wow, I have a 7-minute chunk of time for my show. My show was all brand new. Everything was untested. I wasn't doing a lot of stage shows, so I had to come up with a lot of material. And I'm thinking a 7-minute chunk of time, that's great. That same routine now, without adding in any other effects, is now a 20 to 25-minute routine. And I didn't go back and rewrite and add lines, but I added them, as you're saying, in the moment of doing the shows and then remembering to say them from then on.
It's really nice to hear a little bit about the journey of how the words come to be. It's nice, to remember that these things happen slowly and over time. I'd love to hear the same thing about the tricks. So in terms of effect selection, that's also something, I was talking to 2 people, the people who are trying to get on stage for the first time, people who are trying to do this, more and better. The ones who are trying to do this more and better, they don't really need help with effect selection. They have maybe taste, or not that the others don't, but they've got specific style, specific taste. It's more about all the different things they could possibly do. This is the best. Oh, I love this one so much. People that are trying to get on stage, effect selection is very difficult. What do I do? How do I pick magic that is going to be strong, that is going to work for a stage? Maybe that'll work as an opener. Maybe it'll work as a closer. Walk us through maybe how you used to think about it, or maybe an example of you getting this wrong early on, and then how you think of effect selection now.
Yeah, it is a tough thing because if you're trying to put together a 45-minute show, you look at one trick and you say, this is a great trick. And then you realize that trick takes 2 minutes to do. So, okay, that's fine. But now you have 43 more minutes to fill. And so I think the problems that people run into when they're putting together a show are the problems a lot of us run into. Number one, you think I'm working on a stage show. Let me look up some stage magic in my big library of books. And what do you find out? You find out that all of your books are on close-up magic. So then you think, okay, I'm going to have to buy some books on stage magic. And then what do you find out? That there are no books on stage magic. I mean, and now, of course, there are, and there are more than ever, and it's great, but still limited compared to what's out there on close-up magic. So you kind of make your way and you're looking up tricks and thinking of what you can use. And now it seems like every trick is a card trick or a mentalism trick. And those tricks are great, but you don't want to do all card tricks. And if you're a magician, you don't want to do all mentalism either. If you're a mentalist, obviously it's okay. Or you find that every trick that you think of to use is something that requires you to call somebody up on stage.
It's so funny because it's like you just went through 8 years of everyone's life. You know, you just went through 8 years of so many magicians' life who said, okay, great, I want to go on stage. Amazing. Ugh, why is it all card tricks? Oh, ugh, why is it all mentalism? Oh, okay, how do I do tricks with stuff? And you go, ugh, my tricks, even though they kind of look different, they're all just the same trick, just with different props. Like I'm just writing predictions and putting them in places. You're like, I don't want a show of predictions. And then the same thing that you just said is you're like, wait, all my tricks are me bringing someone on stage, or the opposite. All my tricks are me not. And you just hit every single one of these problems in a row, like dominoes, like, you know, like you just said, you know, and it's funny. You just like, I went from not doing stage magic to only knowing card magic on stage to being like, I'm going to be a mentalist, to being like, I'm not going to be a mentalist, to being like, is there enough stage magic that a human non-mentalist could do in the universe? And then, yes, of course there is. How did I miss all this? You know, like everything that you're talking about, I feel like so many people, myself included, have gone through. So I just wanted to interject to say, you just wiped 10 years. Like had someone told me that and just cut to the chase of 10, you would have shaved 10 years off of my life.
I think it is a thing that we've all run into. So how do you work your way around it? I mean, by routining your tricks together. You know, Harry Anderson, and I've adapted his routine with his Buffalo Bill and cufflinks routine, where with the $5 bills, it's several tricks, several more or less standard tricks by now. You have Grant's $1 Million Bill Mystery, a Hember wallet transformation, and a $100 bill switch. So he did not invent those tricks, but he routined them together in a beautiful way. Mm-hmm. And not only that, it uses a couple of volunteers who stay in the audience and one volunteer who stays on stage with you throughout the whole routine. So that's a whole chunk of time that you can do that uses one person on stage, instead of saying, okay, you were great, now you can go back, now let's get someone else up. Okay, you were great, now you can run back. Okay, who wants to come up for the next one?
Like, that's so good. You just gave one of the best secrets of trying to get your magic from close up to stage, where they all use one person, is put 2 or 3 of them that logically make sense together, and keep the audience member on stage.
Yeah.
That is such a great piece of advice I want to make sure that people didn't miss when you're putting your stage magic together. Yes, using lots of audience members is great, but it's really annoying to go, clap for them. Okay, I need another person. Clap for them. Okay, thank you so much. Clap for them. And, you know, people are just going up and down and back and forth on your stage like nothing. So that is so juicy. I just wanted to pause to mention it because I think that it's so good. You continue if you can.
Yeah, and it's all another option that you have is to not call somebody up on stage and to have them stand up. They're in their seats, but they stand up at their seats, because what are you really asking your volunteer on stage to do anyway? Are they just picking a card and then you're going through your routine for 5 minutes and then they name it at the end? Well, maybe that person doesn't have to come up on stage. Or, you know, you call somebody else up just to vary the look of the, you know, if you're calling one person up and one person up, maybe for your next routine, you call 2 people up. Or maybe there's a couple in the audience and you call the girl up on stage, and then you say, you know, your husband volunteered you, now let's get him up here, and now he comes up on. You find these little things to do just to help with the flow. I mean, that's part of, I think, what you asked.
Yeah, you know, I have something that's coming to mind as I think about magicians who are trying to get on stage, or rather trying to put their show together. And by the way, you know, the reason we're talking so much about like putting a show together and how to put a show together is because John has his amazing book coming out, Stage by stage. And it is incredible about a lot of these different topics that we are talking about right now, and really about getting your stuff on the stage. And we're going to talk more about the book in a minute. I just wanted to mention that because we're talking about this same thing in many different ways right now. We're talking about how to get your stuff onto a stage. And you just gave us some really great ideas about, picking the effects and routining and keeping someone on stage. But I want to mention one of the most common responses I hear from close-up magicians who are trying to get their stuff on stage for the very first time. And it is, they say, I don't want to just do a bunch of tricks. I want to do a show. I want the whole thing to come together. And I think that, people like, for example, Darren Brown and Derek Delgadio are so good that they've done a disservice to magicians all across the globe because they're afraid to go and do 6 tricks on stage in 45 minutes, 6 well-routine tricks on stage. Instead, they think that it has to be about time and that the last trick has to go back in time to the middle trick. And that's wonderful. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes it happens by happenstance. Sometimes that's the design of the show. Can you talk a little bit about this issue of, do I just put 7 great tricks together, or do I have to have this concept of a show which everything works together in concert, in this really perfect way? Can you talk about that issue that a lot of us have?
Yeah, it's easy to get intimidated when you're looking at the people who are the best in the world and comparing them to yourself and thinking of what you want to do when you're just starting out on stage. So you can go in that, if you have a theme in mind, if you have something you want to say that's in your heart, that's great. But if you're just picking a theme because you think it'll be intriguing, like you want to talk about prophecy or something like that, if that's in your heart, great. But if you're just doing it to have a theme, I don't know if it's ever going to really connect with people. So you can have a theme and you can structure your show in small ways, just by making your first trick relate to your last trick in some way. So it doesn't have to be a major way, but just by doing that, let's suppose you do the Bill and Lemon, which I do and which I love, the Bill and Lemon. And the lemon is in a box at the end, which has been in full view throughout your show. And you say, your dollar bill is now in that box, and they bring over the box. And you sit in the audience, and they open the box and they take out the lemon. And then they cut out the lemon, or they cut open the lemon and the dollar bill is inside. That's a great closing trick. Now, what if in the beginning of your show, you show a lemon and you vanish the lemon as an effect? And now you do your whole show, whatever the tricks are, in whatever order they're in. And now at the end, when they bring the box over and they open it up and they pull out the lemon, it's almost like an additional effect has occurred because the lemon has now reappeared. And it's not going to get any kind of applause. Nobody's going to applaud like, wow, the lemon is back, because they never saw the box was empty. But when they cut open the lemon and the dollar bill is inside, that's the effect, but you've created a bookend. And now your whole show almost feels like it came together. I've always said that you could take Tarbell, and if you said, I'm going to look through Tarbell, I'm just going to go by the illustrations or maybe a quick description, I'm going to choose 8 tricks without knowing what they are, and that's going to be my show. If you did that and you chose 8 tricks and you never even tried to routine them or to structure them and put them together, by doing your show over and over, you would find little things that would happen automatically. Like you would say, oh, I'm going to use the marker that I used in this routine, also use it for this routine. And now it's gimmick, but they don't know that I switched it. So it's already ordinary in their minds. So you find these little things as you go.
I think that's so helpful. And I think, a lot of the times we make these callbacks and we make these bookends, as you call them, to be something way, way, way more difficult than they are, right? We try, I have to make sure that it comes back. And, everybody's, like you talked about, you go through card tricks on stage, then mentalism, and then everybody goes, maybe my show needs to end with a confab. Maybe my show needs to end with a confab. Because that's part of it, is we got to figure out a way to end the show in something that feels like a finale. And what you're saying, which is so helpful here, is yes, that is amazing. You can do a confabulation if that makes sense for you, but just a little bit of thoughtfulness to like theatrical closure or bookend, or just thinking about, can the prop I used at the beginning come back at the end? Can the story I used at the beginning come back at the end? Just that will help the show feel like it's coming together as a whole. Is that right? Am I understanding correctly?
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. And also, you learn as you go. So you're watching, or you're doing your show, hopefully videotaping your show and watching it over and over again. And you discover things as you go along. We all love Mac King because he's the best in the world. But his show was not created overnight. It wasn't him sitting down with a piece of paper and writing it out. All these little bits and things got routined in throughout the years and years of doing hundreds and hundreds of shows every year. And I think by doing it that way, you'll find ways to tie your show in together. I mean, I have an act where there is a finale at the end where it does tie in several effects that happen throughout the show. But that wasn't the way the act was created. That was the way the act evolved.
Of course.
Yeah.
One thing that you mention in the book, and it kind of ties to what you were chatting about a little bit earlier, was this idea of authenticity. And Jamie Ian Swiss has also written about this a lot, and speaks about this idea a lot, which is, what do people want when they go and see a show? And his term that he used for it is a point of view. They want a point of view, and I think they're very synonymous, right? People want to hear, I don't want to say your opinions on something because that makes it seem like you're going to yell it from the rooftops or whatever, but they want to get a perspective. They want this authenticity. They want this point of view. Here's my question, or my challenge with it, and I'd love to know what you feel. And I asked Jamie the same question, and that is, let's say you're a 15, 16, 17-year-old who has really, nothing to say. And not like, no shot against that guy. I have nothing to say. Like, I've been wrestling this for a long time. I can rack my brain for things to say. Like, I'm sure if I really dig, I can find something to say that, can be synonymous. But like, there's no message that I'm like, oh, I would love for the world to hear this thing. Like, I need them to know. And I don't care. And I always come to a head or run into some trouble when I'm reading about how to write for your magic, how to create for your magic. Because everyone says, tell them the thing they need to know, be authentic, be your true self, show them your point of view. And I don't know what that means. So I'd love to know, what do you feel about what that means? If somebody doesn't have a great political standpoint or a mild political or whatever it is, I'm not just political, but if I don't really need people to leave the show and go, wow, the universe is a great place, or mathematics is cool, or, whatever it is, what should I be thinking about when I'm thinking about these effects? How do I be authentic or share a point of view if I don't have anything that I'm dying to tell everyone?
Yeah, well, first of all, there's nothing wrong with doing a great magic show with amazing effects and maybe funny moments. And when there is no message, that's okay. I mean, that's great. People like that. But it's almost for us that we sometimes want to do something more, like when a serious actor or a comedic actor is getting great praise for being so funny in all his films and then wants to do something more to show the world that there's more depth to him or her. So we kind of feel the same way, as magicians. I think it's okay if you don't have something to say, but you can still be authentic. We've seen performers who they sort of perform at the audience, and you watch their routines and you get the sense that if the entire audience was replaced with all different people, their routines on stage would look exactly the same. And the audience, I believe, wants to know that the show that's happening right now, tonight, on this night, is unique. And it's unique because of them and their presence and their part. So they can walk away from the show and they can tell you a year later, oh, we were here on the night that the guy pulled a different dollar bill out of his pocket or something like that. Those things are not the end of the world when they happen, as long as you can ride with it, I think. So just to let the audience know that you're a genuine person, and they can get a sense of it. They sense who's genuine and who's not. The quote that I love is by John Burroughs. When you bait the hook with your heart, the fish always bite. I think that's the way it goes. When you bait the hook with your heart, the fish always bite. So when you're being genuine and you're sincere and you're not just the guy trying to look cool in front of the audience and your interaction, they can tell when, it's just like being a person. When you're that younger person that you're talking about, 14, 15, somebody could tell you some tragic thing that happened. And as a person, as a young kid, that's not good and you should act a certain way, like, oh, that's sad, I'm sorry. But when you're 30 or you're 40 or you're 50 and you hear about something like that, you can feel it with the other person. And you have a greater sense of empathy about that. And then imagine when you're 60, 70, grandparents, what do they love the most? They love to just see and spend time with their grandkids. It's no longer about them trying to get. They care about what they can give. So it's the same thing on stage. Be genuine. Even if you don't have a message to say, be your true self. And the audience can sense when you're being yourself and when you're not.
There's two things I'm thinking about with that. The first is that, I love what you said about the comedian who is doing all these comedy things and then he says, I want to show my other side. And I think as magicians, it's very easy for us to get caught up in the silly and the ridiculous and the talking at an audience. We want our tricks to work the same way every night. Like we think the guy who does the trick where he's taking a risk with his equivoque or, whatever is out of his mind because we want to be sure that our force works every night, on the show. So, we want our thing to look and feel the same. But what you're saying here is they don't. They want it to feel really unique and really special. And the other thing that you said, which I'm going to turn into a challenge, is I like to think of that authenticity you're talking about as, almost like breaking the fourth wall, right? Like almost like, I imagine you let your shoulders down and you let your voice drop and you go, okay, everybody, it's like the act goes away, and you say, I do want to share one actual story, something that, actually did happen. Just the way that change in tonality can make you feel that I'm like, okay, let's be real for a second. And the challenge I'm saying is a challenge everybody to just ask yourself, if you never break to let's get real for a second in your show, do it. Like give yourself that chance to take whatever you're doing with your voice and your body, cut it all and say, I want to do one thing. And even if that thing is the thank you say at the end of the night. Hey, everybody, this was an amazing show. Really, sincerely, you don't have to come. You don't have to clap. You don't have to. You guys you made such a great audience. It was so amazing. Like sincerely from the bottom of my heart. Even just saying that gives them the flavor of texture that you're not just talking at them from the audience. And I think just as a challenge for everybody to add that kind of thing to your show, because it's your first step in the direction of, all these things we're talking about, point of view, expression, authenticity, it's your first step is to share it. And for me, I know I'm just reflecting on how I've been through this is I perform and then realize who the heck is that guy up there? Mm-hmm. Right? Like he's acting like some guy, I don't know who the heck that is. And then you kind of like start again and you're right. Okay, this next trick that I add to my show, I'm not going to act like a lunatic. I'm going to act like me. And you just start switching them out, and start revisiting these things and going, what would I do? How would I really respond to this? And also, like you said, over 100, 150 performances, you do respond to the thing. And that's how you would respond to it. You did, right? And you do that again because that was the funniest line or whatever the case may be. That's kind of sitting with me. I want to challenge myself and others to go and try be authentic if you don't have that right now in your show.
And it's not easy because when you're in front of an audience, you feel the weight and the pressure to perform. And as magicians, and myself included, one of the hardest things for us to be is vulnerable, especially in front of an audience. And you're saying to say something, as soon as you decide, okay, I'm going to try to say something sincere and nice, you're going to start planning it.
Yeah.
And you're going to start writing it. And then you're going to lose that sense of genuineness because you just can't help it. So how do you really allow yourself to be so vulnerable and so open. It could also, it doesn't have to be in the course of a whole trick or a whole speech at the end. It could just be the in-between moments of the tricks. Years ago, I don't know why I still remember it. I had this girl on stage and her name was Tess, and she was just a nice kid, bright eyes, happy. And she was about 10 years old. And then there were a lot of kids in the audience that night. And I said something like, these kids are out of control, and people kind of laughed. And some kids said, hey, kids keep you on your toes. I said, yes, they remind you not to have kids. And then people laughed. And then without thinking about it, I said, but if I could have a daughter like Tess, I would be a lucky man, because, what a great kid. And the audience applauded. Now, I didn't try to say anything. I didn't try to say it in a way that was going to be touching or emotional to the audience, but it was a moment of just being genuine. And it's hard to do, especially as magicians. Everyone else, every other art form seems to kind of open their heart a little bit when you write a song or a book or a story. It seems like there's this human connection. And as magicians, we're so used to being the all-powerful person.
And putting up the barriers. I know how this works, you don't. I have to fool you, I have to think. And then all of a sudden we realize, you said something really, really great in the book. You said like there are these different phases for a magician. They start and they're like, I just want to pull it off. Like, if I can do the trick on stage and I don't fail, like, that's amazing. Yeah. And then the next step after that is like, okay, I can pull it off. Maybe I got to figure out, like what I got to say, because this is really hard, and just pulling off is not good. And then after that you go, okay, it's not really about what to say. It's really about, like, what's going on with the audience, right? How I'm connecting with them. And then after you realize that, you're like, no, it's not just about connecting with the audience. It's about that authenticity we're talking about. It's connecting in a way that feels different tonight than it did tomorrow and did last night, and is a little bit different and is special in a way that we are continually connecting. Not just that it's about the audience. Okay, it's about the audience. But now you realize it's like exactly what you said about somebody getting older and older and older. When you're a kid, you're like, yes, act sad now. It's the sad part, right? Pretend to look, everyone's crying. I remember as a kid being in a funeral and everyone being crying, and maybe it's okay, I guess we'll do this. Now, obviously I feel it. And that's what it's like. The first time you go on stage, you're like, okay, magicians keep telling me the script that I write is important, but I'm just thinking about if the torn corner is going to be over here. Like, I can't even think about a script for a second. And then eventually, by the end, you're like, I know the trick is going to work. I know the script is good. I know it's funny. I just have to focus on actually being present with the audience tonight, because otherwise I'm just talking. And that's like you said, the person who's 80, who's like, I don't need the money. I don't need the meals. I just want to enjoy the time together. They can feel it, in a way that somebody who's 12 or 15 can't.
Yeah. And I think it also depends on venue, and you sort of become the performer that you're almost forced to become because of the venues and the situations that you're working in. If you were in a theater every night, you'd say, wow, I love this beautiful 5-minute story that I tell. The audience loved it. Now you're in a situation where people are coming and going. The audience, some of them are ordering drinks, some of them are talking. The bar is still open, and you told them beforehand to close the bar, but they didn't. And what is the wait staff doing in here? We said there'd be no wait service during the show, but they had to do it because the buses were delayed, and now I have to do my show earlier than I planned. So, all these things factor into it. So how do you get in front of that audience and create that genuine moment? You're just kind of trying to get through your material at that point. So it really depends on all those things. That doesn't mean you can't be authentic.
And what's the answer in that? Like, I'm thinking about the difference between when I'm on stage in a theater and I just get to, like you said, you tell a 5-minute story and you can hear them ooh and ah, versus the crowd where you got a microphone and you're yelling and they still can't hear you because everyone's talking. And so what do you do then? Like, do you try to get your authentic moment, or are you just like bang out the show and like, because I feel what you're talking about. In my head, I go, I scrapped the authentic trick, at that one. I scrapped get to the end, big finale, thank you so much, then round of applause, get out of there. How do you give it that authentic moment at a time like that?
It might not be the time to do it. And it's unfortunate when you have a show like that, because you walk away. Those shows don't bother you as much as the years go by. I mean, when you're starting out and you have a bad show, you can latch onto that and it could bother you for weeks. But then you're doing hundreds and thousands of good shows. And so the bad ones don't bother you as much, but they can still kind of stay with you a bit, because you're saying to yourself, they really deprived themselves of a great show. I know what this show could have been, and it wasn't. And I don't like the idea of people walking out saying, oh, he was okay. The magician was okay.
Right.
Yeah. Because it reflects on you no matter what. Nobody is going to say, oh, to be fair, we were talking and we were drunk and we shouldn't have done that. Nobody's going to give you that out. So sometimes you do get into a situation, or you might just have to change your approach. I have an act, and the tricks are the same every night. The jokes are the same every night. I try to be fresh with it every night, but all of that is the same. So sometimes the audience might make you cut time, just get through the material. And sometimes they're so open and so receptive that you're remembering all these great jokes that you sometimes do and sometimes you forget, and you're remembering to do them now. So sometimes, I admire people who don't have a set act, who say, okay, I have to do 20 minutes on this show with several other performers. I have my deck of cards here. I have my other thing here. I'm going to go out and do 20 minutes. I think I know what I'm going to open with, but I'm not exactly sure. And some people can do that. And some people are great at that. Ossie Wind, who you mentioned, is great at that. Ossie Wind is great at everything, but he can get on stage with a deck of cards and he can command an audience who is the troublesome audience that we're talking about. It doesn't mean he's going to take a moment in the show to say something very genuine and heart-touching, because it might not be the right audience for it. But when it is, that's when you can do it. But you're right. Sometimes you just can't do it. Sometimes you have to get through your material, do the time.
I'd love to talk a little bit about, effect selection. In this book, you've got some really, really strong pieces that you teach that are things that you do. And you've really walked through, just stuff you've been doing for decades, and are really, really strong pieces. But really in this conversation of getting from close up to stage, aside from these issues of structure, like, who's going to be on stage, music, light, sound, things like that, there are certain tricks that just can't make the move. There are certain tricks that need a whole different, version. And then there's certain tricks that we never even consider doing in close up. And now on stage, there are things that we want to do. Can you talk a little bit about, obviously the obvious, they have to be able to see them. They can't be really tiny props, the obvious like that. But can you talk a little bit about how you think about what kind of tricks really play great for this environment? And specifically, I'm thinking about the person who was a close-up magician and is now becoming a stage magician, and who's going, what do I do with all of this sleight of hand or card tricks? And be like, what do I do with any of this stuff? Like, do I have to go and buy a giant physical hippity hoppity rabbit, or not that, but some physical prop that'll do a trick, without all these sleights that I learned? So what would you recommend for that person? How would they find some effects that maybe would translate to the stage?
Yeah, it's a great question. You're right. And some tricks won't make the cut. I think Steve Martin had the joke where he was doing these big arenas and he said, my final trick, I'm going to change the date on a dime. So certain tricks don't work on stage. I remember trying to do the anniversary waltz on stage, and it's sort of something that really can be seen. But the anniversary waltz is a trick where people want to actually touch the card and hold it. And so it seems like it would work on stage, but in my opinion, it doesn't, or it didn't for me anyway. So I think you kind of look at your close-up repertoire and see what tricks you're already doing that can play to a bigger group. And you already know what those tricks are. Because when you're working in a restaurant, and sometimes there's a big bridal party that comes in and there's like 30 people, and you're the guy doing magic, so you stop at their table, you know what tricks can be seen by the whole table and which ones can't. When you're doing your routine with your Elmsley count, where the cards are parallel to the table, not everybody can see it. So what you end up doing is walking around the table and you're almost doing walk around magic for that one group. Now you do something like your ring on string routine, and everything happens at chest height, and everything is not on a horizontal plane, it's on a vertical plane. And you find out, oh, everybody can see this. That's a trick. So I do a whole ring on string, ring flight, and ring to wallet routine on stage. And most magicians will see it say, I never thought of doing that on stage. And that's something that a lot of people already have in their repertoire, that kind of routine. So find those tricks that can be seen. And even when I've been in front of audiences with hundreds of people where you would think a ring on string routine for hundreds of people, not everyone can verify that it is the spectator's ring throughout the whole trick. They can't quite see it going through the string, but you have the person on stage with you, and his reactions sell it to the rest of the audience. And they know it's really his ring because he knows it's really his ring. So I feel like that's a great one to do on stage. And it has the effect of drawing people in. If you do something like that near the beginning of your show, that has the effect of drawing in the audience. So they are kind of inching closer without even realizing it.
What do you mean by that? Why do you say that, a trick like ring on string draws people in where another trick might not?
Because it is a close-up trick and it requires the attention and kind of is making people watch closer than they might have been planning on doing. You come out and you do, newspaper tear, and the music is playing and you're tearing the newspaper up. They're watching it, but they might not be drawn into it. So something that requires a little more focus on their part draws them in. Now, I want to do a whole show of close-up magic on stage because eventually people will tune out and say, I couldn't see it. I couldn't see what he was doing. And they'll just get annoyed. So finding something like that will draw them in and doing it near the beginning of your show in order to A, draw them in, but also to be able to do material. If you're new to the stage, now you're doing something that you've done hundreds or thousands of times. So right near the beginning of your show, the audience can see, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. Let's watch this. We're in good hands. They're not going to necessarily say we're in good hands, but they're going to feel it. And then you can go into your other routines that maybe, are new to you, but you've already captured the audience.
This is incredibly helpful because I think, it makes me think of when transitioning from stage back to transitioning to stage, to virtual, is I did the same thing. I said, okay, well, before I invent any virtual tricks, what tricks do I currently know, have a script, feel good about that I can maybe make one tiny adjustment to, and it's going to play for this environment and it didn't play for that environment. And that gives you the foundation to go and start maybe doing the ones that a little bit, or you kind of wanted to do, or whatever the case may be. So I think it's really helpful. And with that, you mentioned something in the book, which I think has been expressed by many magicians in many ways, but I want to dive into it, which is you nail the beginning, you nail the end. Obviously the middle has to be good, but if you make sure that you nail the beginning and nail the end, you've bought yourself a little bit of leeway for the middle of your show, for you to try something, for you to do something that's longer, for the trick that's new, for whatever the case may be. So I'd love to maybe, before we talk about that funky middle, let's talk about the beginning and the end. Aside from bookending, that kind of theatrical completion, something that starts at the beginning, comes to the end, what else should we be thinking about the very, very beginnings and the very ends of our show to make sure that we've got something, just to say again, you were talking about that person who goes on stage with just a deck of cards. I can't imagine that. Maybe I could, but I definitely know my first and last. If I know my first and last, I'm good. I can do an extra 10 minutes, But if I don't know my last, I'm not going to, somebody's at the end of my trick, they go, encore. No, sorry. That was the big finale. I don't have anything else, So, right. So talk to me a little bit about, the first and the last. Aside from bookending, what can we do to make sure that we've got that foundation that we can be confident in?
That's a great question. And it just realizing that those positions are important is going to help your show, because even Tarbell quotes that formula: open and close and put something interesting in between. And you're right, it doesn't have to be bookended, it doesn't have to be structured, but if you know your opening and you know your closing, now you can build out the middle of your show. So for an opener, an effect that I love is a Nielsen bottle vanish. We all know. But what's great about it is that it happens very quickly, and you can do it. You don't need any special clothing to do it. And you can do it under any conditions. So you get to your show and you told them, make sure the audience is seated in front of me, make sure there are no people on the sides of me. And you get there and you find out that people are going to be surrounding you. Oh, and there's a mirror behind you as well. We forgot to tell you about that. And now, oh, and by the way, the sound system isn't that great, so you can't turn your mic up that loud without getting feedback. But you can get through that first effect. The Nielsen bottle, hopefully your hands are not going to be shaking. You're not going to be worrying about any slights, because that trick is very easy to do and very effective. So you can start off your show with a great effect without nerves coming into play, or getting through those nerves and hopefully winning over the audience right in the beginning of your show before you get to the middle. I also like openers where you can kind of interact with people without calling anybody up on stage. So I do that with the Examiner, the newspaper tear, by asking for a number, and I get a lot of laughs just by going for that number. And I love the idea of getting laughs, interacting with people, but not calling them up on stage, and doing your first effect without calling anybody up on stage. It's not a rule. It's okay to call somebody else up. But if you come out on stage and you say, hi, well, it's great to be here. Thank you. I need somebody to come up for this one. You come up. If you can find an opener that doesn't require you to do that, you can involve them. You can do something like the invisible deck, where they stay at their seat and they participate. That's okay. But the Nielsen bottle is just the perfect example to me for something that makes for a great opener and can get you past that moment into the main part of your show.
I think what you said there about the opener is great, which is, not only is it something that's like strong, that really works and is, kind of, let's say, quick, it's certainly not process heavy. But the other thing is just to be honest with yourself and like, hey, you want something that's easy and not technically very difficult and not something that you need to stress about, right? Like, not just about what's so good about this for the audience, like for the performer, you're stepping into a crazy environment. You have to get your bearings on stage. And for you, don't start with something that's very technically difficult or something that's has a lot of steps or a lot of anything. Just go and do the thing that is going to work, because it's going to give you the confidence. Forget them for a second. Yes, them, but you,
Yeah.
That helps a ton. The other one that I'm thinking about is the closer. So the closer, there's a certain, rhythm to a closer, like da 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 da, and yes, yeah, da da da, and good night, it feels like the end, people erupt into applause and it's the end. Thank you so much, over the eruption of people can feel that it's a closer. People can, what makes a trick a closer? You can't crush up the bottle and go, good night, everybody. There goes the ketchup bottle. Good night, everybody. It doesn't work like that. For some reason, that's not a closer. So what is the feature of a closer, or what makes a good closer, so that we make sure we don't, put something there that shouldn't be there?
Yeah, it could be anything, as long as you maybe let the audience know, okay, I've got one last thing to show you. Now they know it's your closing effect, and they can show their appreciation accordingly, not just for that trick, but they know it's the end of the show, so they can give up the love for the whole show. So that's one thing, just letting them know before you do it that it's your closing effect. Now, if you could do something so strong that the audience gets an intuitive sense, like you're saying, that is the closer, even if it's not this big show busy thing, like that's it, that's the show, good night. It doesn't have to be like that. But if it's so amazing and you kind of leave the stage and the audience is still like, how did he do that? That's an okay closer too. It doesn't have to be an over the top finish. Sometimes multiple climaxes, a routine that has several climaxes, is a great way to generate that feeling that you're talking about, because they think that's the moment. And no, there's more. And then they think that's it. And then there's more. And no, that's it. And if you are using music in your show, that can help to punch up the closing as well. So for a long time, I closed my shows with the lasso card trick, which was not necessarily a spectacular closing effect, but it brought everything together, because I said, well, let me see, what if I could use this paper bag, which I had out from the Nielsen bottle advantage, but I switched it. What if I could use this deck of cards? What if I could use this rope? And everything sort of feels like it's all spontaneous, but it's bringing all of those elements together. Yeah, and then you can do it. And when you show the card, you have the right one lassoed. It creates that. It's a great trick, but they know that that was the closing effect. Bill and Lemon is much stronger. But in my routine, it does end with two people on stage, which isn't the ideal thing to do always, but it's okay to do sometimes too. So if you don't want to end with somebody on stage, but you want to close with your strongest effect, you can say something in the beginning of your show, almost as a question for the audience to ponder about life or something else. You do your closing effect, get the applause, they go back to the seat, and you say, and I'd like to thank you. And just remember, and you recap your show a little bit and go back to that question that you asked, and then reveal almost an answer or an opinion about it. And now that becomes your closing. So your closer is not necessarily an effect. It might be an effect, but there's a closing that happens after it. So there are ways around all those things that you're talking about to really make sure the audience knows it's the finale.
I think there's a couple things you said that are really helpful. I love the summarizing of what's going on. That's helpful. Definitely telling them, making it clear, like, this is, I'm about to do one last thing. And also, it should feel like, I like to think about, my example is really not that good, but I was thinking about, like, when you go and you order like a burger, at a burger restaurant, like the picture for the combo looks way bigger than the picture for just the burger. Right? Mm-hmm. You intuitively know that the combo is bigger, and it's because the picture is bigger and there's more going on than the picture of just the burger. And similarly, probably it should be stronger than the rest of your magic, not like by enough that they can intuitively understand, all the tricks were good, but the last one was great. And because the last one was great, it feels like it really was, a big finale. And it doesn't have to be, but certainly if it's worse than the other tricks, it's not going to feel like it's the one, that's the most incredible. So you really want to end with the thing that is the strongest at the very least, and then maybe has some of these factors like multiple climaxes, or, maybe uses the props that have been in play, or uses some of the ideas that have in play, or at the very least, just one kind of bookend, callback, reference, referral, just so that people can feel the completion of a show, feel the whole thing come together. John, this has been really, really amazing. Look at me. Book it, making it clear that I'm about to get to the end. It's obvious, but there you go. So, but I was going to say, this is really amazing. Before we get to the, big finale or the wrap-up questions, not big, I don't have a big finale. I have wrap-up questions. But before we get to the wrap-up questions, there's one other thing I wanted to ask about, which is not about effect selection and not about, the effects themselves, but I wanted to talk about, originality and, creativity. There's this idea in magic that, like, you have to create your own trick. You have to create your own trick from the ground up. If you want anyone to take you seriously, you got to make the whole trick from the ground up. And I don't think that's true. But I also think that if you go on stage and you do someone else's trick, and more or less someone else's, whether or not it's their lines, if it's basically their idea of their jokes or their lines, that also sucks. Not only artistically, but also as a performer, like, you just feel like you're just doing the bit of somebody else. So we want to be able to do our own thing. And I myself have never invented a trick. I've added my own stuff to things. I've never really invented a trick. A little bit of this, a little bit of that. And when I see your magic, you have taken tricks that I know, and you have done incredible things with them, absolutely amazing things with them. And I think there's a lot of people, myself included, that are doing things to tricks and sometimes maybe feel incomplete. Like, hey, I wish I really would have, though, invented my own trick here. And I think for myself, 5-ish years ago or 3-ish years ago, when I was inventing these tricks on stage, I just thought, I realized I am no good at inventing magic. I am way better at selecting and not improving, but at least improving for me. And I'd love your opinion on this, or maybe even your advice for somebody who's going through something similar, who says, I want to do great magic, but I don't want to do someone else's trick, but I can't invent my own trick. I have to turn someone else's trick into my own. What's your advice for that person? What do you have to say to them?
That's a great question. I feel the same. I don't consider myself an inventor of tricks, and I feel the routines that I have and that I've included in the book are truly me standing on the shoulders of giants. If somebody were to look at the original routine and really read it and really learn it, and then really read mine and really learn mine, they would say, wow, you've added a lot. You've changed a lot about this. Where someone looking at it more casually might say, oh, you have a different switch. And then he does. But I don't think it's a matter of changing it for the sake of changing it. Change things, as you say, you've done for yourself. You didn't do that because you wanted to be original, because somebody told you to be original. You said, no, if I do this, this is going to make it better for me. And those are important things. So you don't have to be a great inventor of tricks. You don't have to be even a great inventor of presentations or scripting. It doesn't mean you just take, but you're learning to put things together in a way that is original to you. I mentioned the Harry Anderson routine, the Buffalo Bill and cufflinks. He did the $100 bill switch in the middle of that routine with I forget what it was. It was the torn fives becoming a $10 bill. And then the finale of his routine was the thing where the girl was holding the wallet and he was in handcuffs and she was stepping through him and he was stepping through her. And then that was the whole end. And then the very end was opening the Hembro wallet to reveal the 2 5s, which he gave back to the audience. Whereas I realized I'm not doing that whole bit with the girl. I can do that Hembro wallet segment in the middle. And now I can do the $100 bill switch at the end without the person on stage. Now, I didn't say, if I change it, this is going to make it original for me. I just realized this was better for me because now I could do it on stage by myself, return the money. Nobody is on stage with me. So it wasn't that I was trying to invent anything there, but you just kind of develop things according to your sensibilities and your ideas. A trick that I love, and it's the opening trick in the book, is the Paul Harris Deep Astonishment, the Anything deck. Started off as the Anything deck and became Deep Astonishment. I have loved this since he published it, but I went through so many things of saying, I don't like this, I don't like that. How can I make this work? How can I make that work? And just answering those questions for yourself. So finally, after years and years of doing it, thousands and thousands of times, you do come up with things. I'm sure some of the things that you say that you haven't invented anything, I would look at a routine of yours and say, that is yours. That is your original routine.
What I think helps a lot here, and you've expressed this in some different ways in the book, like we were talking about the magician who, when they step on stage, they just want to complete the trick, and then what they're thinking about four stages later. But I think it's really helpful to, like I said, you shaved 10 years off my life by sharing me that, that process. And I think there's a certain level of maturity in saying, I'm going to take a trick that's theirs being another magician's, and in 5 years from now, it will be mine. And I don't mean I'm going to take the credit for the trick. I mean, in 5 years from now, when I'm proud of this thing that somebody published and I want to do and I'm trying to do, right now it's going to look a little bit too much like Paul Harris and not as much like Jonah Babbitt. But in 5 years from now, it's not going to look anything like, or maybe, it will have the resemblance. And it takes a level of maturity to say, I know that it's going to go through this process. And obviously, you don't want to start as Paul Harris's trick. Do something, whatever you want to do to change it, whatever you like, whatever the case may be. But it takes a level of maturity to know, okay, when it starts, it's gonna not really feel like I've done anything special or created anything or made anything or whatever. And then by the time this is my worker, this will be unequivocally my trick. Like if anybody does this trick in the way that I do it, it's clear that they're doing my version of this trick because it's mine. And I think it takes a level of, maturity to zoom out to 10,000 feet and be able to take a trick and put it in your act and know full well that by the time you're proud of it, it will be your own, creation, not creation, but your own piece, and it won't be this thing that now kind of is exciting to put in your show. Is that right?
I think so. Absolutely. And I'm sure you have pieces or you've had pieces and you almost wouldn't want another magician to see them or know about them, even though maybe you've added nothing to it. It just becomes so personal to you because it's an important part of your show. And you think, well, yeah, you didn't steal that because I didn't invent it either. And it was in Tarbell, but you didn't do it until you saw me do it. And so now the next time I do it, for an audience, it's going to be a little less special because now they've seen you. Now they're going to think I'm copying you. And it's a really weird process. If you have some original touches on the hat tear, that's great, but it's still the hat tear, and you can't be mad at anyone for doing the hat tear. But you can really get yourself to the point where you think, but the hat tear is mine. Like I do that trick. So it is easy to feel that way, but it does become yours. Almost without trying. If you're not even trying to say, well, I have to make this more original. You're just saying, what do I like? How can I keep that? What do I not like? What would be better? This trick would be great. If I could just be instantly reset, I could do it for walk around. How can I make it that? And you're not trying to be original. You're just being original in the way that you can be original.
I think a lot of the times this idea of putting your show on stage or making a show or whatever, there are a lot of these concepts that seem really high level and impossible, like be yourself, and making a whole show come together with a beginning, middle, and end. All these things, you're like, what does that actually mean? Will somebody actually tell me what those words mean? And I think a lot of what we've done in this conversation and what you have done in the book and in your approaching of these subjects is to say, hey, it's really not that difficult. I mean, look, it's difficult, right? It's hard, but it's going to come from your 150 performances. What you really need is the confidence to say, okay, I've got enough that I feel good about the opener. I feel good about the closer. It bookends. I kind of know what I'm doing. I've got structure. I've got things I can refer to. It's like, you got your life jacket on, you got the flippers. Jump in the pool, jump in the lake, because what's going to happen is it's going to take you the 25, 50, 75, 100 to performances to just be able to participate in this conversation, we're having here that is of these high level things we're talking about, to know what we're talking about, you got to be 100 in. And once you're 100 in, it's a completely and entirely different game. And then you read the book a second time. And now you get to really eat all of these parts up and say, oh, why do I keep having this person go up and down on stage 4 times? Maybe I should keep them. Maybe it's not the selection, it's the routining. All of these different bits that is kind of that second layer. So thank you for making this not so daunting, not so complicated, because I know for myself and for other magicians, the emails I get, it is scary as heck to go and do your first show. And the reason I mentioned that idea of people wanting to make a show and not just a series of tricks, because that to me is the biggest sticking point for people I find in trying to put together a show, is they don't want to do 7 tricks. They want to do it's all about time or whatever. And that's great. And if you can do that, that's great. But I think that comes after 150 performances and you realize, wait, 4 of my 7 tricks are basically about time. And if I do this and this, I can, put it, oh my goodness. And you realize it exists. So thank you for making this so easy to comprehend and internalize. Can you talk a little bit about this book, Stage by Stage? What is it? Not much has really existed like it in the world of magic. Can you talk a little bit about what this project is and when and where people can get their hands on it?
Sure. It's literally going from close-up, starting with close-up magic that you already do, starting to think about how to make it play a little bit bigger so that you can go from close-up to parlor to stage, and then routining your stage tricks together in an effective way so you avoid those issues that we're talking about with maybe too many on-stage volunteers or too much mentalism or too many card tricks, routining those tricks together, and then adding in other elements like comedy and music and working with various tables and cases and literally going stage by stage, which is, because of the title. So you're learning a great joke or a great bit, but also you're finding out where does that work in the context of a show. Have you ever read through these one-liner books and you read them and you flip through and there's nothing funny in them? It's 2,000 one-liners and you don't laugh once. And you think, why is that? So it might be the same thing. You might see some of my material and say, this isn't funny. But there's going to be the person out there who says, oh, this suits me. This is my kind of joke. Or this isn't my kind of joke. But you find out where to put it in the show and how to use music effectively. Not just saying,
you need
here's
music.
a great song. What's
right.
that?
Not just saying you need music, right? Like,
yes, exactly. Finding out, for instance, have you ever done a trick or you've seen performers do it? We've all done it. I'm sure I still do it on occasion, but it's the end of your routine. You produce the right card or whatever, and you say, and give Mary a big round of applause. And that round of applause becomes the round of applause for the end of the effect. You kind of accept it. You ask for it for your volunteer, but you're accepting it as applause for you for your, your trick. But they weren't really applauding for your trick. So how can you cue somebody to applaud? Well, what if right when you reveal the card, the music comes in? That's just a moment. It's almost like flashing an applause sign. So that's one thing that I get into in the book. And literally, I teach my entire act from beginning to end, but going step by step. So you see how I routine the tricks, how I added in the other elements, how I developed a closing that is a callback from throughout the show, and adding in all the comedy and things like that. And then, so the whole show is in there, and including other acts and other tricks. And nothing with the sense of, I'm not saying, okay, here's my act, you can do it. But you can go through the book and say, I want to use this, I want to use that. But I tried to do it in such a way that it encourages the reader to do the work for themselves, to see what do they want to do on stage. And like you talk about the person who, does close up and wants to get on stage, I think it's a matter of just doing it. Because sometimes I'll talk about it with a friend of mine, like I did this show and this happened or this show, but we're so grateful to work on stage on a regular basis. I mean, this is very much a blessing. You think about how lucky we are to do what we do when there's that person who would love to do one show, but you're going to learn by doing that one show. You could read your books, you can watch your videos, you could think and you can research, but you do that one show and you're going to learn a lot. And you say doing it 100 times, I think at least 100 times, because the point that you want to get to is the point where you can enjoy your show. And then your show really expands and develops. And now you're comfortable enough to be your true self on stage. That's what we're talking about with authenticity. So how do you become comfortable? Well, when you know your tricks inside and out. I used to get to a place, I would open up my case and look at all my props and make sure everything is right where it's supposed to be. Okay, I need these 3 decks of cards here. I need this here. Double check, triple check everything. And then you become a little more relaxed. You think, well, if I didn't have that, that would be okay. And if I didn't have that, that would be okay too. So I think if you can get to that point where you do your show so many times, now you can relax. Now you're learning to be your true self without worrying about judgment or fear. And now your show really starts improving.
I love that explanation. It's kind of like what we were talking about earlier, the two people we're talking to in this podcast, right? The one who's not done it and the one who is at the tweaking mode, just making sure things are a little bit better, a little bit perfect, playing, having fun at that level. And I love the way you described it. Like, you go from, I want to perform on stage. And then you have 7 years of grueling life. And then you're like, now it's fun. Now it's finally fun, and that really resonates with me. I remember performing, doing a lot of close-up. I was starting to do stage magic. And after my 30th or 40th, I leaned to a friend of mine. I was like, do you like this? Do you enjoy this? Because this is no fun for me. This is a nightmare. And then it became fun. Then it became fun again and even more electric. So I love that advice. And one thing, obviously not to say it out loud, but the joke of the title joke, stage by stage, moving through this step by step, is the the thing that the part that I think is the most helpful here, which is that the person that you are when you're trying to put a trick on stage or trying to have a show is not the person that you are 100 or 200 or 500 performances later. And that we're kind of talking to each of those people, and both the book and this conversation, maybe, like I said, it takes a level of maturity to say, okay, the person that you are when you're adding a trick is not the person you are when that trick is done. The person you are when you're trying to put a show on stage is not the person you are after you have a show on stage. You are in literally different stages of your career and move through them. And it's nice that you and me and 5,000 other magicians at least have all said, oh, maybe I should perform on stage, and went through all of these exact same sticking points, which you've helped pave us through and make it really, really simple. So thanks for making it so wonderful. Thanks for unpacking what's going on in the book. Let's now walk through the wrap-up questions. The end of every podcast episode has the same wrap-up questions, starting with the endless chain. So in order to keep the podcast going on for eternity, each guest is asked to recommend another guest that would be a really wonderful addition to the show, someone who'd be great for this kind of conversation. Who comes to mind? Somebody that would be a good addition to this conversation, and there's two catches. The first is that you have to be able to put us in contact, and the second is that we must not have already done an episode together.
Okay, well, I know you've had Jamie, because you just mentioned Jamie, and I've heard his, and you've had Ossie on too, right? So have you had Nate Staniforth?
Yes, and he's wonderful.
Okay, so you've had Nate Staniforth. He's great too. And he was the one, so I'll have to go back and listen to that, because I was thinking you were going to ask me that, and I wasn't sure if you had him, and I saw him at Magi Fest. And here's a guy who does, the opposite of what I do. He does not use music. His tricks are not really routined together with the last trick relating to the first trick. And I loved everything he did, and so I love that. It just shows you that there's really no one approach, but I don't want to get too far away from your question.
Anybody else come to mind?
Yeah, I would. You know what? I would have Ossie on again, because he has so much to offer. He is the guy.
Deal.
I talk to Ossie every day, and I'm never not amazed by what he knows and what he can share and what he can impart and his understanding. So have him on. And he just also came out with his book, Before We Begin, which is all about pre-show. And I'm not just trying to plug my friend's book, but it's a great book about making your magic stronger in general, whether you use pre-show or not. So anything from Ossie is worthwhile.
Love it. Great recommendations. Even though we've had them, but clear that they're good people. And maybe we will bring Ossie back on, and maybe we'll do something fun with the two of you. I think that's a wonderful idea. The next thing is about modern magic. So what's one thing in the world of modern magic that you like, and one thing in the world of modern magic going on right now that you don't like?
That's a great question. I love that it seems like more things are coming out for magicians to help magicians, whether books or tricks or videos, that people are really giving away their actual working routines and working acts, because there's still so much work to be done. In my book, it's my full act, but it doesn't mean you're just going to read it and do it.
Right.
There's a lot of work to be done, even after learning that. There's just more work to be done when you're starting with the trick that maybe somebody never did, but you want to develop it into a piece. So I like that, even though there's more stuff than ever coming out, and some stuff that's not so great, but the quality of and the people who are coming out with books and different products, it's amazing. So I think there's a lot there if you're ready to absorb it and work on it. I think that's one of the great things about magic.
I agree. There's amazing stuff coming out constantly, and we got an amazing community of people that just like to give. Yeah.
And as far as what I don't like, it's hard to say without sounding like a jaded,
angry magician. Old magician. Yeah.
Yes, which I am. I don't know. It seems there is a rush to judgment. It's easy to put a product down when it comes out by people who've never really seen it or have worked with it, but people can make up their opinions just from a trailer and write it off. And the amount of work that goes into developing something, I worked on my book for 5 years, and it's going to come out and people will have different opinions on it, and that's fine. But there's a lot of hostility sometimes towards things that come out in magic. And if you've learned it, you can judge. It's easy to look at something and you can know whether something is good or something is bad. But sometimes there's kind of a rush to judgment about it too.
Yeah, because there's so much magic being released, people have to make their rush judgments, and sometimes it's.
And I don't know the people who review things. I don't know how they do it, because how do they even have the inclination to go through the thing? Whether it's a book or even a trick, how many times have you not even watched a trailer for a trick? You get the email, it sounds great, you don't even watch the trailer. So how do these reviewers watch it, learn it, do it, test it, and then do it 100 times?
Like, it's impossible, The last question is plugs. Where can people find you, on the internet, and where can people find the new book, Stage by Stage?
Well, thank you for asking. It's published by Vanishing Ink. So I assume not only will they have it, but all of the shops will have it. And it's coming out in December, and it might be December by the time this airs. So that's fine. I'm looking forward to it finally coming out. It sort of debuted at Magi Fest and then sold out. And now we're just waiting for the rest to arrive. And I think they're arriving as we speak. So I'm really looking forward to that. So it's going to be pretty much at all magic dealers, and from Vanishing Ink directly, and from myself directly. My website is just johnmagic.com, and my Instagram is the John Graham. Yeah, I hope to be more active on Instagram going forward. I haven't done much on there, as you've seen, but I met a lot of cool people at Magi Fest who I connected with on Instagram, so it's pretty cool. So that's the internet stuff.
Well, John, this has been an amazing, amazing episode. Thank you for taking the time to chat with me about what I think is a common problem, or a common, a path for magicians, which is, close up and then parlor and then stage, and all of these sticking points that you've really made it easy and given us the pathway for each and every one of them. So thank you so much, John. Thanks for joining us, and thank you for the book. I look forward to its release, and I look forward to holding it in my actual hands. It's looking really awesome. Thank you so much, John.
I'm very grateful. Thank you so much.
Well, there you have it. I hope you liked the episode, and I hope, of course, that you learned something. As always, if you liked it, if you learned something, share it. Tell a friend. It means the world. Put it in a Facebook group. Tell your local magic club, or heck, just yell it out your front door. Anything helps. That's number one. Number two is this. If you are interested in this conversation, then go check out the book Stage by Stage. It's on Vanishing Ink's website, and I'll make sure there's a link in the description. Hope you liked all that. Hope you learned something. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you next Thursday. Peace.